My agent sent me over this kind of PDF, and it was the presentation of this Sampaguita project that Nike had made. I was like 2 nights before my match at Wimbledon, and it was so beautiful. It was like the message behind it was great. I felt that it fit me so much, and I mean, I was so lucky that I got to play on.
Nike has now reportedly placed an extraordinary bet on Alex Eala's future with a staggering 5-year agreement valued at $100 million, a figure so massive it demands attention when attached to a 20-year-old player from the Philippines who has yet to capture a Grand Slam title. Presented not as speculation or internet hype, but as a bold business move, this moment is framed as one of the strongest signals the sports industry has sent in women's tennis in recent years, carrying what many interpret as a direct message to the rest of the WTA landscape, including current world number 1, Aryna Sabalenka. Yet the headline number alone is only part of the narrative. According to this perspective, the deeper story has been unfolding quietly over recent months through Nike's actions rather than public declarations, suggesting a gradual but intentional shift in attention, creative energy, and brand investment away from Sabalenka and increasingly toward Eala. When those decisions are viewed side by side, the contrast appears difficult to ignore. During Eala's Wimbledon debut last year, Nike reportedly chose not to outfit her with a routine all-white tournament look like countless other players, instead giving her a custom hair tie inspired by the Sampaguita, the national flower of the Philippines. Though subtle in appearance, the symbolism behind that choice was presented as powerful, signaling that Nike viewed Eala as more than another athlete under contract and instead positioned her as someone whose identity, background, and cultural story deserve to be highlighted on a global stage. The effort reportedly extended even further with the release of a limited edition shirt created by Filipino artist Georgina Camus, blending imagery of the Philippines' national flower with the legendary grass courts of the All England Club. The significance emphasized here is that such a globally released, culturally personalized design was created for a player who, at that stage, had not yet appeared in a WTA final. That comparison naturally raises the question posed in the original argument. When was the last time Nike launched a limited edition collection centered around Aryna Sabalenka or commissioned a Belarusian artist to produce apparel celebrating her heritage and identity in the same way? The conclusion drawn is that no equivalent example stands out, and within this interpretation, that absence is viewed not as coincidence, but as a deliberate statement about where Nike believes its future investment and storytelling power now belong. What makes this situation so difficult for many Aryna Sabalenka supporters to accept is that the evidence being presented feels increasingly impossible to dismiss. Sabalenka remains the world number 1, a 3-time Australian Open champion, and one of the most powerful and technically complete athletes the WTA Tour has produced in years, and she is still firmly connected to Nike as one of its sponsored stars. Yet the argument being made here centers on a critical distinction. There's a major difference between simply being endorsed by Nike and being treated as the centerpiece of Nike's long-term vision. According to this narrative, Sabalenka receives the traditional sponsorship structure, while Alex Eala is being elevated with an entirely different level of attention and investment. Eala has reportedly been given customized apparel, culturally inspired accessories, collaborations with artists tied directly to her heritage, global ambassador positioning, and even a high-profile appearance at Nike's world headquarters in Oregon earlier this year, where she was seemingly presented not as another athlete making a routine visit, but as a symbolic representation of where the company sees the future of tennis heading. When placed alongside the reported 5-year, $100 million agreement, the overall picture becomes, in this interpretation, impossible to overlook. Nike's reputation was built through calculated decisions rather than emotional ones, and every endorsement, campaign, and athlete-focused investment is viewed as part of a larger strategic business formula. The conclusion being drawn is that Eala offers something uniquely valuable that Sabalenka, despite all of her trophies and dominance, cannot replicate in quite the same way. Eala's influence reportedly opens the door to the enormous Asia-Pacific market, reaching billions of consumers across the Philippines, Japan, China, South Korea, and the wider Southeast Asian region, areas where sports spending and consumer engagement continue to grow rapidly. More importantly, she is portrayed not merely as a recognizable player in those markets, but as a genuinely adored figure. Tennis 365 reportedly suggested that Eala's popularity may already position her as the most commercially attractive sponsorship opportunity on the entire WTA Tour, while Sky Sports presenter Gigi Salmon openly argued that, in terms of crowd energy and public appeal, Eala could already be the biggest star in women's tennis. Not necessarily the statistically greatest player, but the athlete generating the strongest emotional connection worldwide. Nike, according to this viewpoint, has always understood the difference between athletic success and commercial magnetism better than almost any company in sports history. Championships win titles, but global stars move merchandise and build cultural influence. And at this moment, Eala is described as selling hope, excitement, and identity to an entire continent. Everywhere she competes, she reportedly attracts a wave of passionate support, with Filipino fans traveling internationally just to see her in person, sacrificing sleep to watch matches live across different time zones, and filling stadiums in places like Auckland, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Indian Wells, and Miami with energy that becomes impossible to ignore. The atmosphere shifts when she enters the court, cameras gravitate toward her, and social media engagement surges dramatically, all of which is portrayed as organic rather than manufactured by corporate marketing. The story emphasizes that this popularity was built naturally through Eala's personality, her journey, her relatability, her talent, and the emotional weight she carries for a country that has waited generations for a tennis figure capable of reaching the global stage at this level. In this telling, Nike recognized that momentum early and strategically positioned itself to fully capitalize on it. The reported $100 million agreement is therefore framed not merely as a sponsorship contract, but as a declaration of intent, a public statement that Nike believes the future direction of women's tennis could revolve around the young athlete from Quezon City. The narrative then pushes the idea even further by asking what happens once Eala begins winning Grand Slam titles. Because even at only 20 years old, she has already defeated major champions such as Iga Swiatek, Madison Keys, and Yelena Ostapenko, reached the semifinals of the Miami Open after entering through qualifying as a wild card, and climbed to a career-high ranking of world number 29, the highest ever achieved by a Filipino player in WTA history. At the same time, she is still described as a developing athlete who continues to mature physically, expand her skill set, and learn how to handle the pressure of the sport's biggest stages. That uncertainty surrounding just how high her ceiling could ultimately be is portrayed as the true genius behind Nike's timing. The company is not believed to be investing $100 million simply because of what Eala has already accomplished, but because of the superstar future they believe is rapidly approaching. From this perspective, the move is being framed as Nike investing in the future of women's tennis at exactly the moment before the rest of the world fully recognizes where the sport could be heading. The argument is that elite global brands rarely wait until a superstar story has already reached its conclusion. They identify momentum early, commit before certainty exists, and position themselves ahead of the curve while the narrative is still unfolding. Within that framing, Aryna Sabalenka is portrayed as watching a sequence of moments that never arrived in her direction. The personalized kits that were never created around her identity, the limited edition cultural collections that never carried her influence, the artist collaborations that never highlighted her roots, the headquarters appearances that were never transformed into global branding moments. And now, the reported 5-year, $100 million commitment that supporters interpret as the clearest confirmation yet of what they believe Nike's actions have been signaling for months. The conclusion drawn is not that Sabalenka's career is diminished. Far from it. She remains one of the sport's elite competitors and is expected to continue winning and contending at the highest level for years ahead. But in terms of shaping Nike's future vision for women's tennis, directing the company's creative focus, and attracting its largest financial commitment, This viewpoint argues that the decision has already been made and that Eala emerged as the clear choice. In this telling, the reported $100 million figure becomes more than a contract. It becomes evidence of where the brand believes its next era begins. What adds even more intrigue to that narrative is Eala's age. At only 20 years old, the suggestion is that this is not the peak of the story, but merely its opening chapter. And that naturally leaves a series of questions for fans to debate. Did Nike make the right decision by placing such enormous faith in Eala instead of Sabalenka? Has Sabalenka earned a deeper level of recognition from Nike based on everything she has achieved at the top of the sport? Is this simply smart business strategy built around growth markets and long-term influence? Or does it raise questions about how established champions are valued? Some will point to the difference in visibility. Personalized apparel, cultural storytelling, limited collections, and brand attention, and ask whether the comparison has been balanced. Others will focus on Eala herself and wonder whether she is prepared to carry expectations attached to a brand investment of that scale while continuing to perform under the pressure of elite competition. There's also the opposite possibility, that attention of this magnitude becomes the catalyst that pushes her to another level entirely and launches her toward becoming one of the defining players of her generation. Wherever people land on that debate, one thing this narrative wants to emphasize is that the conversation is only beginning, and now the spotlight turns to the audience to decide what they believe happens next.